to the next lesion, that is leukoplakia, next white lesion, leukoplakia, and I'll be describing it under these headings. Leukoplakia literally means a wide raised, non-scrapable lesion which is more than 1 centimeter in diameter. You have to give the definition for leukoplakia that cannot be characterized clinically or pathologically as any other disease and is associated with the use of tobacco. Now, whenever you write about lichen planus, OSMF, leukoplakia, you have to give the epidemiology also. The prevalence is 2.6% in India and 4.11% worldwide. The malignant transformation rate for non-homogeneous is more than that of homogeneous. It occurs usually in 4 to 7 decades and has a male predilection and commonly found in smokers because of the use of tobacco. When we talk of etiology, tobacco, of course, is the main etiological agent, but along with alcohol, it has a synergistic effect of dehydrating the oral mucosa and increasing the permeability, thus facilitating the entry of carcinogens. You can classify leukoplakia as homogeneous and non-homogeneous. Homogeneous, as the term means, it is of uniform texture, and non-homogeneous of ununiform texture. Homogeneous leukoplakia as such can present with different patterns, such as you see here, is a flat, smooth surface, faintly white homogeneous leukoplakia. You can have a corrugated beach and at ebbing tide appearance with the pattern of fine lines called crease tape, usually seen at the floor of the mouth and ventral surface of the tongue with increased chances of malignancy. Also, you can get a wrinkled with fissures. The surface will have a dry, cracked mud appearance, or the surface will be thrown into papillomatous projections or cauliflower appearance, which is known as papillomatous. Non-homogeneous leukoplakia will not have a uniform texture or uniform color. Usually it has a red component as well as a white component and is usually seen in the retrocommittal area in BD smokers. That is why it is also called as BD leukoplakia and has high malignant transformation rate. It can appear as I told you, in a nodular or speckle pattern where you can see nodules, whitish keratinized nodules on an erythematous background, or it can be ulcerated or verrucous. And when the red and white component are seen together, we call it as erythroleukoplakia also. Now, proliferative verrucous leukoplakia is rather a recent terminology given to an aggressive form of leukoplakia and usually seen in the mandibular, alveolar, gingiva. It is quite extensive, begins as flat hyperkeratotic plaque and then it becomes exophytus and verruciform, and it spreads over a larger area. Importance is that it has high malignant potential, and because of the surface appearance of papillomatous projections, it is proposed to have a viral etiology also. Now, diagnosis of leukoplakia with a clinical history and examination, we can diagnose leukoplakia, but it is important to confirm the diagnosis by staining, by vital staining, and then doing a biopsy. Vital staining can come as a short answer question, so please note that. There are advanced methodologies for diagnosis such as fluorescence. There are light-based diagnostic methodologies for diagnosis of oral pre-cancer as well as cancer. You can do a laser biopsy, but we may not get much material for histopathological examination. Now, differential diagnosis of leukoplakia. Whenever you are asked about differential diagnosis of a particular condition or a lesion, it is better to organize the features into a table by writing all the lesions on the top of the table, and on the side you can write all the features. Like here you can see oral leukoplakia differential diagnosis includes plaque-type lichen planus, tobacco-induced keratosis, frictional keratosis, and many others also. And on at the side you can write the features like sexual predilection, the type of lesion, the history. As you see here, oral leukoplakia is always associated with tobacco habit, while lichen planus is associated with stress. That is a predisposing factor. Now, lichen planus presents with burning sensation, while leukoplakia is asymptomatic. The leukoplakia, the borders are quite sharp and demarcated, while lichen planus has diffuse borders. There is Wickham's striae seen, violaceous, cutaneous flat top, papules in lichen planus. So you can arrange the features in this tabular will be quite impressive. The other differential diagnosis for leukoplegia are aspirin burn. The patient will give you a history of placing a chemical in the oral cavity. Chronic hyperplastic candidiasis, which we have already seen. Hairy leukoplegia is a very important differential diagnosis, but it has a viral etiology. It's caused by Epstein-Barr virus in HIV infection or in immunosuppressive conditions, seen only at the lateral border of the tongue. There are receptors at the lateral border of the tongue which causes these lesions. Now, white sponge nevus is another differential diagnosis, but there will be a familial background for it. And then leukodema, it disappears on spreading or stretching the oral mucosa. Linea alba bacchalis is a normal variant. Morsicatio baccharum, the patient will give a history of parafunctional biting, habit of biting the cheek or lip. So, after you write the differential diagnosis, whenever you write differential diagnosis, it's important to justify why you have added it in the differential diagnosis and how to rule out each lesion. Simply enumerating will not fetch marks. Okay? So please note that. Now, we can stage oral leukoplegia according to the extent of the size of leukoplegia, the site that is involved, whether it is homogeneous or non-homogeneous, and whether there is dysplasia, mild, moderate, or severe. So we can score it. L is for extent, S is for the site, clinically whether homogeneous, non-homogeneous, C stands for that. Then P1, P2, P3 will tell us the grading of dysplasia. Then we can stage it under these 1, 2, 3 according to the scoring for LSEP. Why we are doing it is to formulate the treatment plan. At the same time, dysplasia will tell us to do what management has to be done. Also to compare between leukoplakic lesions if you are doing a study or a research. So coming to the management of leukoplegia, first and foremost in leukoplegia and oral submucous fibrosis will be to stop the habit. Patient should stop the habit unless there is, otherwise there's no point in treating such lesions. So first and foremost, you have to write stopping or quitting the habit. Then leukoplakic lesion can be subjected to a topical antifungal therapy for 2 weeks so that we can have a better visualization of the lesion so that the candidal component is removed. And then you can recall the patient, do vital staining and then do a biopsy. Now in biopsy, if there is no dysplasia or if there is mild dysplasia, you can do conservative treatment but has to be strictly followed up. And then moderate or severe dysplasia, you can do surgical excision, laser ablation or cryotherapy. So we can classify management under conservative and surgical. And then conservative, we can do there are natural antioxidants as well as synthetic. Vitamin A is used commonly because of its keratinolytic properties, antioxidant, and reepithelializes the mucosa. Bleomycin, 5-fluorouracil, as you see here, they're all used, imiquimod are all used for mild dysplastic lesions. And if there is dysplasia, you can do surgical stripping, then low-level laser therapy, photodynamic therapy. Cryotherapy is very effective where you necrotize the leukoplakic lesion with a liquid nitrogen. So all these modalities can be used, but it is very, very important to follow up the lesion. If there is any change in the appearance of the lesion, then you have to, during the follow-up, then you have to do a rebiopsy and follow-up. Coming to erythroplakia, it's a lesion of the oral mucosa that cannot be categorized as any other definable lesion. It is often mistaken for erosive lichen planus. So that can be written as under the DD for erythroplakia or erosive OLP. Erosive LP has diffuse borders and there will be Wickham's striae. While erythroplakia will have a patient will be having a habit of using tobacco and the lesion will have sharply demarcated borders. Coming to OSMF, as you start, you have to write Winbob's definition of oral submucous fibrosis. You can by heart that. And then coming to the etiopathogenesis, there are local etiological factors such as chili, arachinet, which is very, very important, and mystery. Systemic factors such as nutritional deficiency, autoimmunity, and there is a genetic susceptibility also that is proposed. So these are predisposing factors. Now the alkaloids in the arachinet stimulate cultured fibroblasts to proliferate and synthesize collagen production. The flavonoids will increase the stabilization and lead to cross-linking of collagen, and the constant irritation due to the arachinet beta-lactude habit can can lead to chronic inflammation and activate T cell and macrophages, leading to increase in collagen synthesis and resulting to oral submucous fibrosis. Now, the patient will present with symptoms of limited mouth opening and inability to protrude the tongue. And when you examine, you can see blanched, opaque, marble oral mucosa. The tongue will be depapillated. You can see hockey stick or shortened deviation of the uvula. All these are conditions which are presented in oral submucous fibrosis. You can stage, like we did in leukoplakia, you can also give a staging for oral submucous fibrosis. We can follow Chandramani More's classification, which has a clinical staging as well as functional staging. The differential diagnosis for oral submucous fibrosis include anemic stomatitis, which can be ruled out with a blood examination. Scleroderma is another differential diagnosis because of trismus and stiffness of the mucosa, but it's a connective tissue disorder. Radiation fibrosis, where the patient will have a history of radiotherapy done, and if patient has undergone a surgery in the oral cavity, that can lead to a vertical scar band and mimic oral submucous fibrosis. We can manage oral submucous fibrosis first by asking the patient to quit the habit, giving nutritional support with vitamin A, B, C, and iron. Then alpha-lipoic acid is a very good, has been found to be effective in treating oral submucous fibrosis by degrading the collagen and suppressing inflammatory response. Lycopene, is a potent antioxidant like beta-carotene, and the richest source is tomato. Even ketchup consists of large amount of lycopene. Curcumin, which is the active ingredient of turmeric, has been found to have anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, fibrinolytic properties, and it inhibits collagen synthesis and improves mouth opening. Hyaluronidase is used effectively in oral submucous fibrosis. Injections are used to improve mouth opening, as it decreases collagen formation and breaks down hyaluronic acid. Placental extracts are also effective in the management of oral submucous fibrosis to reduce burning sensation if used topically, and if we give intralesional injections, that will improve the mouth opening. The mechanism is biogenic stimulation, and the content are nucleotides, enzymes, vitamins, amino acids, and steroids. Interferon gamma is also effective in the treatment of oral submucous fibrosis. But the first line of treatment, if patient presents with burning sensation, is always topical, and with limited mouth opening, it's always injectable steroids. Also, physiotherapy will help to to bring about elasticity of the oral mucosa by diathermy or by massage or with laser. It's found to be very effective. Patient can undergo oral exercises. And if all these fails, we can go for surgical excision of the fibrotic bands to improve the mouth opening. If it is very severe, if the patient has severe restriction of mouth opening, we resort to bilateral temporal myotomy or bilateral coronidectomy, which has found to improve the mouth opening. Whatever said and done, in the malignant transformation rate is 4 to 16%, we have to strictly follow up oral submucous fibrosis on a long term.